Buckle up, everybody. We're diving headfirst into the wild world of global economics and tech today. We're talking trade wars, we're talking anxieties about recessions, and we're talking China's just huge and growing power on the tech scene. Yeah, it's a lot to cover. So to help us make sense of it all, our guide today is Ulu. That's a scan of global economic and technological trends for anyone who doesn't speak Mandarin. And get this, we're going to find some really surprising connections, like what happens on one side of the world can seriously impact your daily life.
Yeah, it's really fascinating to see how like all these seemingly separate events happening around the world, they're actually all super intertwined.
Yeah.
And we'll see how action is taken in one country. They can set off a whole chain reaction, and it leads to sometimes really unexpected consequences for, well, everyone.
Yeah, for sure. For example, we're going to be looking at how Trump's steel and aluminum tariffs, from way back when, they basically ignited a full-blown trade war. And this isn't just like political posturing. We're talking the EU and Canada hitting back with their own tariffs. And get this, over 500 billion yuan worth of goods are affected by this.
Yeah, that's a massive impact. And the situation is, uh, it's particularly tense with Canada right now. Since they happen to be the biggest supplier of steel and aluminum to the U.S. So, I mean, you can imagine this whole thing could have a ripple effect on tons of industries and, could even hit the prices of everyday things you buy.
Exactly, exactly. I mean, we're talking potentially about price hikes on everything, like cars, imported foods, you name it. It really shows you just how interconnected the whole global economy really is. But, trade wars aren't the only thing on our plate today. The U.S. economy is giving us these really mixed signals, and everyone's talking about, like, potential recession.
Right. Well, despite some recent gains in the stock market, some top economists, like Bruce Kasman over at J.P. Morgan, he's putting the odds of a recession this year at a pretty scary 40%.
Hmm.
And the latest CPI data, the Consumer Price Index, which measures inflation, well, it came in a bit lower than expected. But I think it's a little too early to say if that means things are actually turning around.
Right, right. And then, you look at the stock market reactions and it's all over the place. The Dow Jones dipped, but then the S&P 500 and the Nasdaq actually climbed. So it makes you wonder, are investors feeling optimistic or are they just bracing for impact?
Yeah, it's a really complex picture right now. I mean, there are definitely some factors that point toward a potential recession, but there are also some signs that certain sectors are pretty resilient. So it's a situation that needs careful analysis, and you really need to understand how all these different economic forces are playing off each other.
Definitely, definitely. We'll have to dig more into what a potential recession could mean for like your personal finances and investments later on. But for now, let's switch gears and focus on China for a bit. Now, Citigroup came out with a pretty bold prediction. They think 2025 is going to be a turning point for China's economy, with growth potentially hitting its lowest point.
Right. Yeah, Citigroup's analysis suggests that both actual and nominal growth in China, it could bottom out in 2025, which I mean has huge implications not just for China, but for the entire global economy as well.
So, like, what does that actually mean for people? Could China's slowdown end up dragging down other economies too?
Absolutely. I mean, a slowdown in China, the world's second largest economy, well, it's bound to impact the global demand for like everything, all goods and services.
Mm.
And, that could lead to job losses, less investment, and even price fluctuations all over the world. Those ripple effects they would be felt everywhere.
Yeah, it's a sobering thought. But even with all this economic uncertainty, there's another side to China that's making headlines. Their emergence as a tech innovation powerhouse. They're making some really serious moves, especially in things like artificial intelligence.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, China's commitment to like advancing technology, it's undeniable. Their AI plus action plan,
Yeah.
it goes way beyond just research and development. It's a whole strategic roadmap for integrating AI
Yeah.
into like every single part of their economy. And they're super actively fostering the growth of what they call unicorn and gazelle companies,
Right.
which are basically, high growth startups with the potential to become global giants.
So it's like they're building a whole ecosystem designed to pump out technological breakthroughs. And they're not stopping there. They're also in this fierce race to develop 6G technology, which promises to be even faster and more powerful than 5G.
Yeah, it's crazy to think about the implications of 6G. Imagine a world where downloading a whole movie takes like seconds, or, where we're all using holographic communication like it's nothing. It's a future filled with incredible opportunities, but also some potential challenges as well.
Yeah, it's exciting and a little daunting at the same time. But with China putting itself at the forefront of tech innovation like this, it raises some pretty big questions. Like, what does this mean for the global balance of power? And what about the ethics of these rapidly developing technologies?
Right. Those are some crucial questions we need to grapple with as we, navigate this new technological landscape. It's not just about the advancements themselves, but how they're developed and implemented, and ultimately how they impact society as a whole.
Yeah, absolutely. So even though there's so much focus on a potential economic downturn right now, it's clear that China is also making these strategic moves to become a leader in the future of technology. So let's take a closer look at some specific market trends and potential investment opportunities, the kind of stuff highlighted in our source material today.
Okay, sounds good. Well, one of the most interesting things happening right now is in Shenzhen's real estate market.
Hmm.
Despite all the global economic headwinds, Shenzhen's secondhand housing market has been booming. Prices have gone up for 5 weeks in a row now. It's a surprising trend that has a lot of analysts scratching their heads.
Interesting. So what's driving this growth? Is it a sign that China's property market is bouncing back, or is there something else going on?
That's the million-dollar question. Some people think it's connected to the three lows, one wide policy that was recently introduced in Suzhou. This policy basically offers, low down payments, low interest rates, low monthly payments, and wider loan terms, making it easier for people to get into the housing market. So it's possible that this policy, if it spreads to other cities, it could trigger a domino effect and revitalize the property market in other places as well.
Okay, so is this like a signal for investors to jump back into the Chinese real estate market, or is it too soon to say?
Well, it's always a good idea to be cautious in a volatile market. While Shenzhen's recent performance is definitely encouraging, it's important to remember that it's just one city. We need to see how these trends play out over time and consider the bigger economic picture before making any investment decisions. Right, right. Okay, let's shift back to the tech world for a minute. You mentioned China's one brain, multiple machines AI platform earlier. Can you break down what's so groundbreaking about it
Yeah.
and what it could mean for the future of like robotics?
Sure. So this platform, which they call OT, it represents a pretty big leap forward in artificial intelligence. It's designed so that one AI system, the brain, can control and coordinate the actions of multiple robots.
Oh, wow. So instead of each robot operating on its own, you could have like teams of robots working together seamlessly, all guided by one central AI.
Exactly. Just imagine the possibilities in manufacturing, logistics, healthcare, basically any industry where robots could play a role. This technology could drastically increase efficiency, productivity, and even safety in, all sorts of workplaces.
Yeah, it's a fascinating concept, but it also brings up questions about like the potential impact on human jobs, right? Could this technology end up displacing tons of workers? That's a valid concern for sure, and it's a conversation we definitely need to have as these technologies keep developing. It's crucial to think about the societal impact of automation and, figure out ways to ensure that the benefits of these advancements are shared widely.
Definitely. Definitely. It reminds us that technological progress doesn't come without its own set of challenges, but it's also a huge opportunity to rethink how we work, how we live, and how we interact with the world around us. Speaking of game-changing technology, our source mentions a fascinating development in the energy sector, the creation of a carbon-14 nuclear battery.
Oh yeah, this is a really remarkable breakthrough with some potentially huge implications.
Uh,
Unlike traditional batteries, a carbon-14 nuclear battery harnesses the slow decay of carbon-14, which is a naturally occurring radioactive isotope to generate energy.
I gotta admit, the idea of a nuclear battery sounds a little intimidating at first. Is it safe?
I understand the concern, but it's important to understand that this technology uses a totally different approach to nuclear energy than like nuclear power plants.
Yeah.
The amount of carbon-14 they use in these batteries is minuscule, and the decay process is extremely slow and controlled. These batteries are designed to be incredibly safe and efficient.
Okay, so like, how long are we talking about in terms of lifespan? What's the potential here?
The estimates are pretty amazing. These batteries could potentially power devices for hundreds of years.
Hundreds of years. That's mind blowing. Imagine what that could mean for everything: medical implants, satellites, deep space exploration. And what about the potential impact on the green energy sector? Could this be the breakthrough we've been waiting for?
I think it has the potential to be truly transformative. Imagine pairing Renewable energy sources like solar and wind power with these incredibly long-lasting batteries. We could create a truly sustainable energy future, free from the limitations of traditional energy storage technologies. It's a it's an exciting prospect and something researchers all over the world are watching closely.
It's clear that innovation is moving at warp speed these days, and it's reshaking everything. But let's not forget about those skyrocketing chicken prices we mentioned earlier. It might seem like a random tangent, but it's actually a perfect example of how seemingly unrelated events can have this, domino effect on a global scale.
You're absolutely right. Those rising chicken prices are a direct result of disruptions in the global supply chain,
Yeah.
particularly in the poultry industry. When you have events like these bird flu outbreaks, like we've seen recently in the U.S. and New Zealand, major poultry-producing countries, well, it really throws off the balance of supply and demand.
So even though we might not be directly affected by these outbreaks ourselves, we still feel the impact when we go to the grocery store, right?
Exactly. It just highlights how interconnected our global food system is and how vulnerable it can be to disruptions. Whether they're caused by disease, climate change, or even geopolitical events, it's a reminder that we're all part of this complex web of interconnected systems. And actions in one part of the world can have ripple effects that reach way beyond their immediate origin.
It's a sobering thought, but also kind of fascinating. It makes you realize that even something as simple as the price of chicken can tell a much bigger story about what's happening in the world.
Absolutely. And that's what makes analyzing these global trends so interesting. It's like piecing together a giant puzzle, where each piece, no matter how small, contributes to the overall picture.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, before we move on to the next part of our deep dive, there's one more interesting thing from our source that I want to touch on. The city of Shenzhen is offering subsidies to people who trade in their old cars for new ones, with a particular focus on electric vehicles.
Interesting. It's a smart strategy with multiple benefits. It encourages people to upgrade to more fuel-efficient vehicles, which, helps reduce emissions and is good for sustainability. And it also gives a boost to the electric vehicle market, which is a key industry for China's future economic growth.
So is this a sign of things to come? Could we see similar programs popping up in other cities and countries, as the push for electric vehicles keeps gaining momentum?
It's definitely a trend worth keeping an eye on. Governments all over the world are looking for ways to encourage people to switch to electric vehicles. And Shenzhen's program could be a model for others to follow. It also presents a potential investment opportunity, since the demand for electric vehicles is only going to go up in the coming years.
All right, that's a great place to wrap up part one of our deep dive. We've covered a ton of ground today, from trade wars and recession fears to China's rise as a tech powerhouse and how global events can impact our everyday lives.
For sure. But we've only just scratched the surface. In part two, we'll dig deeper into some specific companies and market trends that are shaping the global landscape. We'll be looking at Walmart's controversial actions in China, the surge in exports from Guangdong province, and a potentially groundbreaking partnership between TSMC and Intel. Stay tuned for more insights and analysis. So, welcome back to our deep dive into, everything happening in the global economy and tech world. And before we move on, I wanted to circle back to something we talked about earlier about the interconnectedness of global events. We talked about the potential for an economic slowdown in China and how that could, impact other economies around the world. But there's another layer to all of this, especially when you look at the U.S.-China trade relationship.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, our source material highlights this. The specific example of how these tensions are playing out, even in the corporate world. It involves Walmart, the retail giant, and their dealings with Chinese suppliers.
Right. So the Chinese Ministry of Commerce, they recently summoned Walmart representatives
Yeah.
to express their concerns over what they say is pressure on Chinese suppliers to drop their prices. Basically, the accusation is that Walmart was trying to offset the costs of the U.S. tariffs by squeezing their Chinese partners.
Wow. So instead of just absorbing those costs themselves, Walmart was allegedly trying to shift the burden onto Chinese suppliers and ultimately, I guess, Chinese consumers as well.
That's what they're saying.
Yeah.
And it's definitely caused a stir, as you can imagine. From China's point of view, this is seen as a move that could escalate tensions even further, in the whole ongoing trade dispute.
Yeah, it's like adding fuel to the fire. It shows how actions by a single company, even a huge one like Walmart, can have these really big geopolitical implications.
Absolutely. It highlights the complexities of navigating global supply chains these days in a world where trade tensions are so high. It's a reminder that these disputes aren't just abstract economic concepts. They have real-world consequences for businesses and people on both sides of the issue.
Yeah, definitely. And it also shows that China is willing to push back against what they see as unfair practices, even when it involves a major global player like Walmart. So speaking of China's, their growing influence, our source material also sheds some light on some interesting export trends coming out of Guangdong province.
Right. Yeah, the data from Guangdong is it's pretty fascinating. In the first 2 months of 2025, the province saw this huge surge in exports: electric vehicles, motorcycles, shipping containers, and drones.
Okay, so it's a pretty diverse mix of products, but they all seem to point towards this trend of technological advancement and manufacturing power. What do you make of this export boom?
Well, it's a pretty clear sign that China is really strategically positioning itself to be, a dominant player in these key industries. The government has been investing heavily in these sectors, fostering innovation and creating a good environment for businesses to thrive. Combine that with the growing global demand, especially for things like electric vehicles, as people become more concerned about sustainability. And, well, you have a perfect recipe for massive growth.
So this could be a sign that China's dominance in these industries is just going to keep growing in the future.
I think that's a real possibility, yeah. They have the resources, the infrastructure, and the political will to become global leaders in these sectors. For investors, this presents both opportunities and challenges, of course. It's important to really understand the dynamics of these industries and to identify companies that are, well-positioned to benefit from this growth.
It's a good reminder that we live in a world that's changing incredibly fast, and staying informed about these global shifts is more important now than ever. Now, let's switch gears for a second and talk of a development that's really making waves in the semiconductor industry. Our source mentions that Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company, or TSMC as it's known, is considering a pretty bold move involving Intel.
Oh, yeah. This is a fascinating development, and one that could have some far-reaching consequences for the global chip market. So TSMC, the world's leading chip maker, has reportedly proposed this joint venture to operate one of Intel's semiconductor fabrication plants.
So essentially, TSMC would be partnering with Intel, a major competitor, to make chips. That seems like a pretty unusual alliance.
It is, and it really says a lot about the current state of the semiconductor industry. The global demand for chips is it's just skyrocketing right now, driven by the huge growth in smartphones, data centers, and basically any technology that uses these tiny but powerful components. So TSMC is definitely looking for ways to expand their manufacturing capacity to meet this demand, and partnering with Intel, even in a limited way, could be a strategic move for them.
But why would Intel agree to this kind of partnership? Wouldn't that give TSMC a foothold in their own backyard?
Right, that's the interesting part. The details of the proposed venture are still a bit unclear, but it's been reported that TSMC wouldn't have a majority stake. So this suggests that Intel might be open to giving up some control in exchange for, TSMC's expertise and manufacturing capabilities. It could end up being a win-win for both companies, allowing them to both capitalize on this huge demand for chips.
It's a complex situation, and one that'll be interesting to see how it plays out. It highlights the intense competition in this industry and the need for for strategic alliances. The semiconductor market is really a microcosm of the global tech landscape, It's fast-paced, it's innovative, and it's constantly evolving.
Exactly. And it really underscores how important it is to stay informed about these developments. These technological advancements are shaping our world, and understanding what's happening is crucial for navigating the future.
Well said. I think that's a good place to pause for now. We've covered a lot in this second part of our deep dive, from trade tensions and, corporate maneuvering to export booms and these potentially game-changing partnerships in the tech world.
Yeah, for sure.
And we're back for the final part of our deep dive. We've made it through trade wars, shaky economies, and China's just massive ambitions in tech. Now we're going to focus on specific breakthroughs that could seriously change the future and what they mean for you.
Yeah, it's been quite a journey so far. We've seen how events that seem completely isolated can actually have these global consequences. So now let's look at how some emerging technologies could create their own ripple effects. And we'll start with something that, honestly, sounds like it came straight out of a sci-fi movie. China's very first carbon-14 nuclear battery.
I gotta say, when you first mention a nuclear battery, I'll admit, I kind of pictured, like, those giant cooling towers of a nuclear power plant. But you explained that this is totally different, right?
Oh yeah, completely different. It's not about harnessing nuclear fission like they do in a power plant. Instead, it uses the slow, controlled decay of carbon-14, which is a naturally occurring radioactive isotope. So think of it as capturing energy from a process that's already happening all around us.
So no chance of, like, a meltdown happening in my pocket.
Not even a little bit. The amount of carbon-14 they use is tiny, and the decay process is super slow and predictable. Safety and efficiency were the top priorities when they designed these batteries.
Okay, that makes me feel a lot better. But the thing that's got everyone talking is the potential lifespan of these batteries, right? We're talking about powering devices for how long?
Potentially, we're talking centuries. Imagine a world with pacemakers that never need replacing, or satellites that orbit the Earth for generations, or even deep space probes that can explore the universe for hundreds of years without running out of power.
It's almost hard to imagine. And it goes beyond just convenience too, right? I mean, this could revolutionize sustainability and how we think about energy in the future.
Absolutely. If you combine this technology with renewable energy sources, like solar or wind power, you could create this incredibly sustainable energy ecosystem. We could break free from our reliance on fossil fuels and power the world in a way cleaner, more efficient way.
The possibilities are pretty mind-blowing. And it's a good reminder that, amidst all the economic uncertainty and global power struggles, there's also this incredible innovation happening that could make the world a better place. But innovation isn't always a smooth process, is it? Sometimes it's about adapting to unexpected disruptions, like the ones we've seen in the global poultry industry.
Very true. Those bird flu outbreaks we talked about earlier are a great example. They show just how vulnerable our interconnected systems can be.
Huh.
And while the most immediate impact is felt in the poultry industry itself, the ripple effects go way beyond that.
Right, we're already seeing that in the rising prices of chicken and eggs at the grocery store. But what about the long-term effects of these disruptions? Could they lead to permanent changes in how we produce and consume food?
I think it's definitely possible. These outbreaks force us to really rethink our food systems and figure out how to make them more resilient. You know, we might see a shift towards more localized food production, maybe a greater focus on biosecurity measures, and potentially even a move towards diversifying our protein sources.
It's a good reminder that even something as basic as, like, a chicken dinner
Hmm.
is connected to this huge web of global factors, disease outbreaks, climate change, trade policies, everything. And it highlights the importance of understanding those connections so we can make smarter choices as consumers and, as citizens.
Exactly. The world is this complex, interconnected system. And understanding those connections is essential if we want to navigate the challenges and opportunities of the 21st century.
I couldn't agree more. As we wrap up this deep dive, I'm really struck by the contrast between the anxieties we talked about, the trade wars, the economic uncertainty, and then this incredible potential of these new technologies that are emerging. It's a reminder that the future isn't set in stone. It's shaped by the choices we make and the actions we take.
I think that's a perfect way to put it. This deep dive has given us a glimpse into some of the forces shaping our world, both good and bad. It's up to each of us to stay informed, to think critically about these issues, and to contribute to building the future we want to live in.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Thanks for joining us on this journey through the global economy and the world of tech. Until next time, stay curious, keep exploring, and remember, the future is ours to create.